Welcome to This Week in Health IT. It's Newsday. My name is Bill Russell, former healthcare CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week in Health IT, a channel dedicated to keeping health IT staff current and engaged. Today, Drexta Ford is in the house, and we talk about everything. It feels like we talk about everything. In this episode, we actually disagree on something. It's a lot of fun going back and forth. Hope you enjoy. Special thanks to Health Lyrics, who is our Newsday show sponsor, for investing in our mission to develop the next generation of health IT leaders. You know, I ran into someone and they were asking me about my show. They are a new master's in health administration student, and we started having a conversation, and I said, you know, we've recorded about 350 of these shows. And he was shocked. And I said, well, he asked me who I had spoken with. And I said, oh, you know, just CEOs of Providence and of Jefferson Health and CIOs from, you know, Cedars-Sinai, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, and, you know, just all these phenomenal organizations, all this phenomenal content. And he was just dumbfounded. He's like, I don't know how I'm going to find time to listen to all these episodes. I have so much to learn. And that was such an exciting moment for me to have that conversation with somebody, to realize we have built up such a great amount of content that you can learn from and your team can learn from. And and we did the COVID series. We did so many great things, talked to so many just brilliant people who are, you know, actively working in healthcare, in health IT, addressing the biggest challenges that we have to face. We have all of those out on our website, obviously, and we put a search in there, makes it very easy to find things. All the stuff is curated really well. You can go out onto YouTube as well. Almost every episode we've done since episode 6 has been recorded as a video podcast, so you can watch the video as well. You can actually pick out some episodes, share it with your team, have a conversation around those things. We don't expect that everybody's going to listen to every episode we record, and that's why we cover different topics, and we are starting to organize our website around topics and collections as well, to make it easier for you and your team to find those things which are going to help you to really stay current and to really advance the knowledge of the team. So we hope you'll take advantage of our website, take advantage of our YouTube channel as well. Newsday, we have co-host Drexta Ford former CIO and founder of Drexio Digital Health. Hey Drex, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you? What's happening?
Good. We decided to do a hat episode. You have yours is cooler than mine. Mine's Baylor. This is where I send money to. And yours is your Drexio Consulting, which actually makes money.
This is where people send me money. Yeah.
Yeah. Clearly you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and understand the right side of the equation as opposed to my side of the equation. Although I am a proud Baylor dad, really excited for my daughter going there. It's a great school, and
good.
We'll see what happens. It should be, you know, they had the men's and women's basketball team last year, probably both could have won the national championship, but the season got upended, and you know, we'll see what this year brings.
Yeah.
Hey Drax, there's a lot of stuff going on. Like we could probably do news for like 3 hours if we really wanted to today.
For sure. There's a lot happening. The inauguration yesterday.
I've heard there was an inauguration yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday. I'm not sure. When are you going to show this? Monday?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You blew the illusion. You went through the.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, we record this on Thursday, the week before it goes live on Monday. But yeah, the inauguration was yesterday, and went down without a hitch. I think they took down the barricades and stuff, like, you know, a couple hours after it was all done. There was just nothing going on. So,
and how about Amanda Gorman? Did you see her, the poet laureate who?
I did. I don't know. I don't understand people who had time to watch the inauguration. There are certain things like, it's like, did you watch remember when they had hearings and stuff? Did you watch all the hearings? I'm like, I have a job. I do work during the day. I don't know how people do that. So I'm not dissing you at all. I'm just wondering how people have time to do that.
I'm such a political nerd. You know, I have a degree in public administration. So I spend this is also part of something that's really interesting to me. But I also work late nights and overnight sometimes, depending on, you know, how my mood is striking me. So I can take time during the day to watch stuff that other people can't.
Yeah. And it's, I'll pick it up on podcasts. I'll pick it up on Well, I don't watch TV either. So people are like, "Oh, what news station do you
Wow.
tune into?" I'm like, I don't. I don't watch TV. We have TV because it's part of our subdivision. We have to have it, sort of thing. But I think the only thing I watch on TV now is golf.
Super productive then. Take all that
You
wasted TV time and do work.
well, it's not wasted TV time. It's podcast, it's audiobooks, it's that kind of stuff. And I don't want to sound smarter than I am because I'm not. Clearly I'm not listening to books on epidemiology. I'm listening to books on how to run a business and those kind of things. So we'll see what happens. All right, so we've got a lot of topics. We've got some security stuff. We could start there. We've got some, we're going to hit the vaccine stuff. We could talk about maybe predictions for what we think is going to happen in this administration. There was an interesting USCDI came out version 2. There was a story about Amazon. I didn't find the story all that interesting, but I wouldn't mind going back and forth with you of where Amazon's going to go post Haven. But to start the show, I think we should just note that Micky Tripathi was tapped to be the Biden's national coordinator for health IT, and excited about that. He was on the show last year. We did a past, present, and future of interoperability. That he's been there since the beginning. He's a great contributor, wonderful gentleman, and just wish him all the best in that role. And we will keep a close eye on, keep tabs, and check in with him from time to time. So.
For sure. Micky and I worked together quite a bit when I was the CIO at Steward, and he was, like running all of the interoperability stuff for Massachusetts. And it's good to see him.
Yeah,
it's well deserved, and it's the right person, right? At the right time to do this.
Yeah, he is a great candidate. I mean, he's so immersed in it, so it's not like there's no learning curve whatsoever. I mean, he steps in, picks up exactly where they left off. Now, I mean, they'll direct it wherever the administration is going to direct it, but he's also very adept at moving in and out of different groups of people. So if you want a person who's going to be apolitical on this topic, I think Micky's a great candidate for that as well.
Agree. Glad he's there.
All right, so I will let you decide where you want to start. I threw out just about all the topics I want to talk to, but where do you want to start?
Well, so there's this weird thing that I think is going on, but I'm not really sure it's going on, that I kind of want to talk about. It's tied to cybersecurity. Is it okay if we start there? Okay. Yeah. So I will send you these 3 articles. I don't know that you've seen them or read them necessarily, but I will send them to you so that you can add them to the post-game playlist for the listeners. The first one has to do with, back in December, there was a new cybersecurity donation safe harbor rule that was created, that created the capability of bigger organizations, bigger healthcare organizations. It allows them now to donate cybersecurity services and technology to smaller organizations and not run afoul of the Stark laws. I find that to be very interesting. And the last time that something like this in my head happened was in 2006, when there was a new rule that was a Stark safe harbor rule that said that you could donate IT stuff if you were a big organization to smaller organizations, smaller healthcare organizations, and not run afoul of the Stark law. So this is a weird sort of pattern, right? Okay, I know it's been a long time ago, but I feel like I've started to see this TV show before. Yeah. The second article has to do with a new HIPAA cybersecurity law that promises to lower fines and give you audit relief if you're using one of the frameworks that the government has approved. So again, this has to do with kind of like making sure if you're doing the right things and you wind up being breached, the government will cut you some slack if you're using the right framework. I find that to be kind of interesting. And then the newest thing is that Biden has included over $10 billion in, part of the COVID relief proposal, but it's, the program to try to get money into the hands of people who are trying to create better cybersecurity programs. And I know that this is going to send people off on a little bit of a rocket ship, because I'm going to say a couple of words that can be inflammatory, but it makes me wonder if there isn't, probably without calling it this, does this start to feel a little bit like maybe a meaningful use? There's the trigger words, the meaningful use program for cybersecurity. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how they're going to structure that money that's being spent, but just with the setup, here's the donation, start safe harbor. Here's the framework. Here's the stuff you have to comply with for us to cut you some slack if you get breached. And now here's money. I feel like I've seen this TV show before.
meaningful use for cybersecurity. Actually, I sort of cringed there a little bit when you said that. And hopefully we learn from meaningful use. Almost everybody who was there early on will say, there's some things we just didn't take into account. Let me break all three of these down real quick. So the first one is essentially, I'm able to go into my integrated delivery network. Oh, no, not my integrated delivery network. I was always able to do that, but my clinically integrated delivery network, which is
right,
the people that aren't necessarily a part of our system, but
right,
are a part of our contracting and a part of our delivery mechanism, those kinds of things.
They may not even have a formal relationship with you. This could be a group practice that refers patients to your hospital. They just, when a patient needs inpatient services, they refer them to your hospital. Now, in the past, if the big system gave that small group practice something, maybe in exchange, now you still can't do it in exchange for admitting, patients to your hospital, but in the past, doing anything like that could cause you to run afoul of these safe harbor rules.
Yeah.
And so
the reason we have to love this is, the network is vulnerable at its weakest point. And if you're connecting into all these, privately owned hospitals or privately owned clinics, privately owned physician practices, and those kind of things, generally speaking, their cybersecurity practices and tools and those kind of things are going to be a lot weaker than the $6-7 billion health system, even $3 billion health system. Therefore, if you're the cybersecurity head of the $3 billion health system, you've been looking at this for literally a decade, trying to figure out, how do I make that point in my network more secure? But you weren't able to give them anything.
Right. And so now, sort of in this construct of services and technology, there's a lot of capabilities that you could provide. And so it's an interesting scenario. I'm writing something with David Schoolcraft at OMW Law here in Seattle on this specific situation, and those articles will release sometime soon.
All right. So the second one is, if I follow, I don't know, the NIST framework for whatever, my fines will be less and whatnot. I'm not a huge fan of that. I mean, I understand the positive nature of it. It gets more people to adopt the frameworks, and the frameworks are good. But here's the thing. It's like saying, Bill, if you follow this recipe, everyone's going to eat this food. Well, you shouldn't eat anything that I bake. I mean, I can cook, but I can't bake. You shouldn't eat anything I bake. It doesn't matter what recipe, and you shouldn't give me any leniency if I follow the recipe, but it still tastes horrible. A breach is a breach is a breach. So, well, that's not true either. But a breach is a serious event, whether you followed the recipe poorly or you had nothing in place. So I'm not jumping up and down about that. What are you? Do you like that one?
Well, so I think this is where the concern comes in with the meaningful use kind of cross conversation, right? Part of meaningful use was you have to do these things, and if you do them, you will have meaningful use of an electronic health record. It was very compliance oriented. Check these boxes and we will give you money. But that didn't really help us, as a CIO at a health system doing meaningful use. In many ways, the things that we had to check the box on weren't the things that were helping us build a good clinical program. They were things that we had to check the box on to get the money, and so we did. And so I wonder if this isn't going to be a similar challenge, right? I guess it moves people it moves people further to the left or the right, whichever way you look at it, moves them further down the maturity models. So at least they're using a framework. If they use it in a very compliance way, declaring that you're using a framework and using it in a compliance way is very different from having a really good, solid cybersecurity program. But it's better than somebody who hasn't declared any framework and has no cybersecurity program. So maybe it's, it's better than nothing, but I think it's also, it can be a challenge if it's a check the box drill. And that's always been a problem in cybersecurity.
And then what'd you say, 10 billion? The
10
Biden
billion.
administration is setting aside 10 billion. Yeah. And actually, I think that is underfunded. And my guess is that's just one swath of it. My guess is there's also military money that's being spent on cybersecurity. There's probably a bunch of different agencies that are spending money on cybersecurity. I think that budget needs to be a lot higher. I mean, did you see one of the banks of a country, maybe New Zealand or something like that, got hacked? I mean, there's an awful lot of warfare. And I use that term specifically. There's a lot of warfare going on right now between countries. It's almost like the drive-by shootings of Chicago back in Al Capone days. That's happening with these crime organizations, crime syndicates, those kind of things. And it's happening all over the place. And you almost need an Elliot Ness kind of program to weed this out.
Yeah. And this is the part where I say things and then I realize you have to be careful what you wish for, but there's a part of me that, this is not a political statement, but like, forget Space Force. Let's take that money and that initiative and put it into a cyber defense force for the United States. Because I think creating these situations where you leave a lot of small organizations and small hospitals, especially in healthcare, small hospitals, independent practices, alternate sites of care, other things, to fend for themselves when it comes to cybersecurity just isn't good for the ecosystem. It's not good for the economy at large, right? People keep getting dragged off and beaten up in alleys. They keep getting hit by drive-by shootings, to use your analogy. And maybe it would be better if somebody sort of centrally stepped in and said, here's how we're going to do this. Now, there's a lot of possible downside to that too. Don't get me wrong, but there are just some things about this that make me wonder, do we need more, oversight, guidance, definitely funding and support and insight. And, the challenge that we have right now with somebody being breached by ransomware or something else, and then the whole drill is to kind of keep it as quiet as we can and not tell anybody, and to have press releases that say really innocuous things so that all the other people in the neighborhood, all the other people in the ecosystem can't find out the information to figure out how to protect themselves. That in and of itself is a big challenge too.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this as a transition to our next topic, which is whenever somebody says, hey, let's fund the government, the federal government, not the state, but the federal government, to put a program together, they're going to make it better and those kind of things. I always look at it through a sort of an eye of, will it make it better? Are we going to end up with the world's best iron lung kind of comment? Right. And then, and so in cybersecurity, I am 1,000% behind a federal program. I don't care if it's military funded. I don't care if it's, I don't care where the money comes from, and clearly it needs to be done well. But it is the federal government's job to protect us from foreign actors, period. And so, fund it, get it started. Let's get going. The reason I say that is because we're gonna shift gears and talk about vaccine distribution. And I see more and more people calling for, hey, Biden's going to do a national blah, blah, blah. I hope he does not do a national program. We are pretty close at this point. I'm talking to my neighbors. I'm talking to my parents. People are in line. People are getting the vaccine. The distribution mechanism. We've gone through the worst part of the project to sort of stand it up. The goofy stage where information isn't really readily available. People don't know what they're supposed to do. Where am I supposed to go for this? Well, we've gotten through that. And I'm a little concerned that we're going to step back now and say, no, we need to fix this. Well, there's things we need to fix, but not, I mean, it's not a reboot of the program. That would be really scary to me.
I think there are things in place today that are definitely usable and we should continue to expand on, but the logistics to deliver now, this is sort of for me in the context of, and we know that Johnson & Johnson is coming with a vaccine that maybe is a one-shot vaccination that could last for a year. But as it stands right now, 2-shot vaccine that lasts for about 6 months, and there's 300 million people, and let's say we're just going to vaccinate 70% of them, 100 million shots in 100 days. I've done some math, and I actually posted something out on Twitter the other day, begging someone to tell me that my math is wrong. But it turns out there's something approximating 3 million shots per day that you have to give forever in that model just to keep COVID away from 70% of the population. The current system logistically is completely incapable of handling that.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be an orchestra conductor
and
that helps us figure out how we take a bunch of PAs and put them in Ubers or something, or MAs and put them in Ubers or something to go out and give shot. I don't know what the logistics are, but we are way under what we need to be to actually get the economy moving again, get people back to work, get life back to normal.
And you know what, Drex, this is what I love about having you on the show. And I love about this back and forth is because we're finally disagreeing. People are like, oh, you guys always agree.
No,
so we'll disagree on this, and we'll disagree from a couple different perspectives. The reason the distribution is the way it is because we had a limited supply of the vaccine. So as we start to ramp up, which no one expected it to be ramped up by January 20th of 2020. So in fact, if you ask experts, they wouldn't even expect it to have a vaccine until late this year, let alone distributing it until next year. So, it's one thing. Again, I'm really apolitical on this. I want to get shots in arms as much as anybody else. We're trying to solve the wrong problem because look, if you ramp up the production, I can get it in arms. Here's how you get it in arms. You give it to CVS, you give it to Walgreens, you give it to Walmart. Okay? They are within 10 miles of 95 to almost 100% of the population. So now people know, oh, all I have to do is go to Walgreens. All I have to do is go to CVS. They know where those places are. We can ramp that up. If the production's there, we can ramp that up very quickly. And you know what? Those organizations understand the consumer, understand how to do scheduling, understand how to do outreach. The way we're doing it now through hospitals don't understand how to do scheduling in this manner. They understand how to do scheduling for surgeries and those kind of things, but not this kind of stuff. They don't understand outreach in this manner, in this way. It's a muscle that they're developing, but they're not there yet. And so, I sort of step back and I go, okay, we can ramp this up as quickly as you want, but that's not the problem. Everyone's worried about that problem. That's not the problem. The problem is that if I see all these different numbers, but roughly 30 to 40% of the people don't want to get a vaccine. That's the problem. And that's problem number one. Problem number two is there is the disenfranchised, the people in our society. We need to go out to them who aren't readily.
Has to be a whole education program, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, education is always the silver bullet. So, I mean, I read these posts of these anti-vaxxers and it's close enough to the truth that you're like, gosh, it feels right, but it's not right. And it reminds me of what my friend used to say. He said, when half truth is presented as whole truth, it becomes untruth. And when they say, well, it's not a vaccine, it's a genetic. Okay. Yeah. I mean, technically that's true, but it's also a vaccine. It's a different type of vaccine than we've ever had before. It's new, it's different, but it's still a vaccine. I'm sorry, I've rambled there for a little bit.
No. I mean, it's fine. I think, one of the articles that I know that you're going to include in the post-game feed here is an article by Ezra Klein that, it's called Biden's COVID-19 plan is maddeningly obvious. And it is a little Trump slammy. There's no doubt about it. But realistically, all the things that you just said are exactly right. Like there's lots of distribution channels that we could and should be going through. And there is a lot of vaccine supply right now that is still, being held back and isn't being put in arms for a lot of different reasons. And all of that, I think Operation Warp Speed was great getting us to the point of having a vaccine, but the distribution part of the plan, that isn't warp speed. And that's where we've got to make these shifts. And it includes all this stuff: education, helping people understand what it is, how it's good for them, how it changes the economy, and then putting them in places where they're easy to access. Let's put some grease on this. Let's make it slippery so people can get these shots as quickly and easily as possible. And I know we've got phases, and I know some states are now starting to sort of like slip back on phases and say, okay, now everybody under 65. I mean, I'm the last person in the line. I have, I'm lucky. I have no comorbidities. I don't have any of the issues or challenges, and I'm not 65. So I'm going to probably be one of the last people to get it, which is why I want it to hurry up.
Yeah.
I want to get my shot too.
All right. Well, let's move on. I'd love to hear where you think the Biden administration, and by the way, I need to give you kudos. I'm sad that I have to give you kudos on this, but I mean, you called this. You said, "Hey, we need to, keep closer tabs on Trump between the election and the inauguration because he's going to do something really stupid." And lo and behold, he did something really stupid. And I said, "Oh, come on! There's a lot of checks and balances and whatnot." And sure enough, that event at the Capitol, there's just no excuse for. So,
yeah,
and you called it. I wanted to give you, the shout out that there are times when you're right and I'm wrong. So
it's so rare, though. It's nice to hear you say that.
So what's the Biden? What can we expect from the Biden administration? Do you think? Well, actually, let me narrow this down to health. Yeah, to health IT. Where are we going to? What can we expect?
So I think, as kind of the foundation of the program being a believer in science and the science behind it, I hope what will happen is that, the Office of the National Coordinator continues to stay in place. It returns to a role maybe of more prominence than it's had for the last 4 years, and that it's data driven to help us figure out how to create better delivery systems. Kind of that's it in a nutshell. When it comes to how are we going to spend money, what are we going to spend money on, that it's not driven by, it's always driven by politics, to a significant degree, right? But hopefully it's largely driven by really smart people like Micky Tripathi, who tell the Biden administration, senators and congressmen, here's where we need to spend money, and they listen. That's kind of my hope, that the culture and the environment that is created is one that supports that kind of, smart people making smart suggestions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we will. All you have to do is really rewind to look at the Obama administration and figure out where this thing's going to go. And to be honest with you, I don't think ONC, CMS, I don't think there's going to be much change there from the perspective of health IT. I don't think, it's still interoperability is key. We're still going to be seeing FHIR. We're still going to be seeing the US CDI. A different emphasis, right? The current or the departing administration was really, the emphasis was on building a market. How can we make healthcare into a true market? And I think we'll come off that a little bit, but again, it'll look very similar because the underlying infrastructure for either a market-based or even a single payer-based and that kind of stuff, or even Medicare Advantage for all, still looks the same. You're still trying to share the information across a large swath of the mechanism.
Yep.
Still trying to enable the innovation community to innovate on top of the data. And this is one thing I like about Biden, and we talked about this last time. The Biden Cancer Initiative, he traveled around, he understood the limitations of interoperability. And I think when someone says to him interoperability, he's not going to have to look at somebody else. He's going to go,
what do you mean by that? Oh, I know what the problem is. Yeah,
I know what the problem is. And we've got to get in front of that. So I think that's positive. And we will probably go back to, again, the Obama administration, we'll probably go back to those bundles in the bundled payments, and those things are hard to do. And again, we talked about it. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's show, which will be last Friday's show. Bundled payments and return to that with Rob DiMiche, former CFO for UPMC, because that was one of the themes that we talked about at the JP Morgan conference. So, all right, so those are some of the things we can think about and look at. Let's close out.
Bundle payments are really kind of this is how you figure out how to get to value-based care, right? I was at Stewart. We were a pioneer ACO, and a lot of that was around, how do you figure out how to get to value-based care and set sort of here's how it works for everybody else to be able to sort of come along for the ride. And that has sort of intermittently fell apart and then come back together in different places. I'm hoping that there's a better stream of good examples for everyone to follow.
Yeah, the bundles for people who don't know, it's like hips and knees. What they will do is they'll go into a market and they'll say, on average it costs this, so CMS is going to pay this. And by the way, they'll also structure it to say that's from diagnosis to complete recovery. And so the challenge for back when I was doing this integrated delivery network was that, we from diagnosis, we were typically in the room, right? So our network was in the room, but you come in, you have the surgery, and then you go into, rehab and some
PT.
Some post-surgery areas that we didn't own or control in any way, shape, or form. And you were still managed. First of all, the cost was for the whole thing. And second of all, you were still managed to the quality that you could deliver, not only within your four walls, but also in potentially several other entities. So we had to, as the network, we had to figure out how to manage these entities. And it was not as easy as you would think.
Yep, that's true. Sure. Real challenge.
So let's end this with some forward-leaning. Well, actually, you know what? There's another story.
Yeah, do another one.
Let's hit this. So, Healthcare Innovation Group, Mark Haglin, they do an annual State of the Industry survey. I'm going to give you a couple of their findings. So one of their findings is IT budgets are seen increasing to meet needs. And they said among the survey respondents, 31% said that 0 to 5% of the organizational revenues are expended on IT. 34% said 5 to 10% of their revenues are going to IT. Fully 35% said that more than 10% of their revenue are being spent on IT. So as for trends, fully 67% of the respondents said that their budget has increased over the past 2 years, while 26 said it stayed the same. Only 7.5 reported that it had decreased in that time. I'd be surprised if many decreased last year. There was an awful lot of extra costs in dealing with the pandemic. Does it surprise you, those numbers, in terms of 31%, 0 to 5%, 5 to 10%, 34%, and over 10%, 35% of the revenue number being spent on IT?
I'm really surprised. And I think some of this also might have to do with the way that the math is done.
Yes.
Realistically, back in the day, I talk way back in the day, where you had an IT budget and you were counting, that was your entire, when people asked that question, you thought about IT budget as the spend. But because we've evolved to this world where IT is the enabler for everything that we're doing, very often IT costs wind up being buried in other departments' budgets. And that could be an informatics person. It could be the cost of a cloud-based application that is only used by the finance team or the marketing team. And so it's in the marketing budget. There's a bunch of ways that IT, everything's connected to everything now. And so IT is a part of everything. And so I think when you start thinking about how do you do the math, there's maybe some health systems now that have indicators that this is an IT thing, but it's not in the IT budget. And that may be why the numbers go up.
Well, there's a couple of organizations, Scottsdale Institute, Gartner, and others that do comparisons of different health systems and their spend and that kind of stuff. And I talked to the person who had to put it together, and they said, this is really hard because some IT budgets have clinical informatics, some don't have clinical informatics, some count the full cost of analytics as all the analysts that are out in the field, some only count it as the central organization. And so it was a huge normalization effort before they could produce something that would allow you to compare yourselves to similar health systems. And so
anytime I've done this, it's been, children's hospitals comparing each other, integrated delivery networks comparing each other. I mean, like you said, you can kind of go through the list. Sometimes HIM is included, sometimes HIM isn't included. Sometimes biomed, clinical engineering is included, sometimes it's not included. And every place is different. Sometimes you're running 4 EHRs and sometimes you're running 1. Sometimes you're running 2 ERP systems and sometimes you're running none. And so there's a lot of, benchmarks are great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good place for us to start with, in an IS department or any department, and look at those benchmarks and say, why are we different from the benchmark? Not, we're higher than the benchmark, so we must cut spending.
I know.
Right?
I hate that.
You have to look at those benchmarks and you have to say, why are we different from the benchmark? And if you have a legitimate reason that you're different from the benchmark, because you have a much more complicated system, or because you've really spent a lot of time working hard to consolidate applications and simplify the infrastructure, maybe you're below the benchmark. CFOs don't like it when you make the argument that we need more money because we're below the benchmark. You usually get, beaten in the head with a frying pan because you're above the benchmark. And it's really just a question. Why are we different from the benchmark? Can you legitimately explain why you're different from the benchmark? And if you can, then you're right-sized for your mission that is being asked for by your leadership team and board. That's where you should be. If you're not, then that's maybe where you should get smashed with a frying pan.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, rarely was it that I ever presented that number, because I felt like, and we had it. We always had it, because every now and then somebody would ask me.
CFOs always have it.
Yeah, they would ask me, how do we perform against others? And I'd be like, all right, this is how we perform. And we were always in the, from a spend standpoint, one of the lower percentages. And one of the reasons for that was we were not an Epic or Cerner shop. We were a Meditech shop. Mm-hmm. And we were running a $6.5 to $7 billion health system on Meditech. Well, the thing about Meditech is, quite frankly, it's flat out 50% less to run Meditech from an operations standpoint than it is to run Epic. And I'll challenge
anyone. It's not just an EHR; it has all kinds of stuff embedded in it, right? I mean, you've got ERP and supply chain, and so these are all other systems that you don't have to buy and run.
Yep. The other thing, so we were always in that right percentile. But my case was always this: what's the right thing to do? Where are we going from a strategic standpoint? What are we trying to do as a health system? Are we trying to be a consumer-facing health system? I mean, I don't care what the strategy is. It could be that strategy or some other strategy. If we're trying to be those things, let's identify the technology components, put the right technology components in place in order to deliver that, determine what the most cost-effective way to do that is, and do that, and not sit back and say, oh my gosh, we spent 7% this year, or 6%, or 10% of revenues. You spend the appropriate amount of revenues to execute on the strategy. That's what I always felt.
Exactly.
We talked about bundles and value-based payments and those kind of things. And they have a little thing in here that, risk contracts and those kind of things are going to go up. And I agree with that. And one of the points they make in this article is, if risk-based contracts go up and value-based care goes up, then we need to get really good at analytics. And, it's interesting because what did they say? A majority, it's crazy that the numbers in here, a majority feel like they are top of the line when it comes to analytics. And I just don't, let's see. Yes, we're advanced in our analytics development, 37%. We are early on in our analytics journey, 38%. We have not used data analytics until now, 12%. We have no plans to use data analytics on any level or scale, 12%. So maybe that was overstated.
12%. So those are the organizations that will be bought soon.
Yeah,
they're on the merger and acquisition list.
Well, 24% are on that list. We have not used data analytics until now, and we have no plans to use data analytics. That 24% is clearly some sort of asset play to be purchased. I don't even understand that answer. 38%.
I think there's a, go ahead.
How can 38% say they're early on in their analytics journey?
So this is another one of those things where I think there's maybe some benchmark thinking going on, that we're doing better than most places that we know of with analytics, right? So we must be in the higher category of analytic use. But I look at this, the places that I think are doing really good, really well with analytics, it's not a thing that is only coming out of an analytics or knowledge management shop at that organization. And it's not just dashboards. It's actually the creation of a culture where frontline managers and directors are citizen data scientists, and they have access to and the ability to understand data in a way that helps them run their part of the business in the most efficient way possible. And that can be clinicians, that can be clinic managers, that can be, kind of across the house. When you get that, where everybody's got access and everybody can actually use the data to make better decisions, sometimes on their own, now you're really doing something with analytics. But having a bunch of dashboards and posting dashboards and sometimes just retrospective stuff, that's nice, but I don't consider that to be advanced analytics.
Yeah, no, that was sort of my experience, that we had a lot of data wranglers, people that would take all this crazy data and make sense of it, or actually not even make sense of it. They would get it into a form where we could actually run reports on it. And that was a significant number of people on the staff that I had. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to change the mindset of, all right, we need to produce insights. And nothing brings that home more than, trying to do social determinants is one, or actually a pandemic brings that home, right? Sure. If I were a leader of a health system, I would go in right now and say, all right, I need detailed information on the population that lives in our markets. I need to know, who lives here year round, what's the age categories, that would have been when we're getting ready for
comorbidities. And that's the whole outreach program, right? And then you start pounding that list. Hey, come in, you got to get a shot. How can we get you scheduled? You're in the 1B window. Yeah, let's go.
Absolutely. So it's insights, but think about, there's a lot of other areas like social determinants areas where you can actually gain insights from the data that we have within the EHR that would allow us to do things. Now, we keep talking about getting more and more data sets and bringing more and more data sets in. This is going to be one of those key areas for us, is how do we push this forward? Is it a build your own? Is it a buy capabilities? Are we going, are we going to a health catalyst? Are we going to our EHR provider? Where are we going to get these capabilities? Are we going to build it ourselves? Are we going to do our own data store? Are we going to go to Google? Mayo has gone to Google for some things, and Ascension has for some things. What's the right strategy at this point?
Yeah, I look at this a little bit from the cybersecurity perspective, right? Analytics people, the core analytics people are really smart. They're not widely available. You have to figure out how you're going to hire them, attract them, and retain them at your health system. And if you're not in one of those really great places, you may have a really hard time hiring and retaining those people. So I think, there's a lot of thinking that healthcare executives have to do around what's the possibility of building my own cybersecurity program or my own analytics program, and should I be using a partner to help me with that? And if I do, then, who are the partners? I think you have to think through this, do I really have the capability of building my own analytics program, kind of soup to nuts, or do I need help? And if you need help, you should get help. You should go out and look for that.
Yeah.
I think there are, products and capabilities that they may not be perfect, but they're going to get you a long way down that maturity model.
Yep. It's interesting. Drex, as always, it was a lot of fun to
seriously, me too.
We'll do it again in 6 weeks, and look forward to seeing how much. We never did a prediction. Like, you and I should do like a full on predictions. Like, this is what's going to happen. I read some of these predictions and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Some of them just sort of leave me flat. Like, of course that's going to happen. Amazon's going to improve in healthcare. It's like, they're going to make strides in healthcare. I'm like, of course that's going to happen.
Right.
But tell me
specific. Where. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
that's definitely the hard part of predictions. You can make the big, broad predictions, but figuring out the ones that are actually going to hit and stick. That's where, that's where you're only going to have about a 5% hit rate.
Yeah. If you were to tell me Amazon Pharmacy was going to make a big hit 2 years ago, that was a prediction. But saying it this year is like, well, no kidding. I mean, they have PillPack. They've announced it. They're going to market. Right. I know where they're going. Now, if you tell me their Amazon Health employee program gets launched at a new employer, that's news. That's, that'll be interesting. And actually, I don't think that'll happen this year. Amazon is one of those companies that moves really slow until they're not moving slow. And then they're moving at like hyperspeed.
Yeah. It's like an earthquake. There's pressure between the tectonic plates, and it builds and it builds. And then once they think they really know something, there's a giant slip. There's an earthquake, and there could be an earthquake in healthcare this year, I think.
Yeah. Well, we will see what happens.
I see some of my friends that's been hired by Amazon, and I'm kind of blown away that some of those people are working over there now. And when I talk to them, what they tell me is, I can't really tell you what we're working on. That says to me, there's a big tectonic plate about ready to slip. Well,
it's not one thing, right? So it's the Alexa stuff, and we're going to put one of these in every hospital room, and we're going to put something in the OR and whatever. So we're going to do a bunch of stuff in voice. We're going to do partnerships,
supply chain.
It's supply chain. Everyone's always looked at supply chains, and durable goods, they sort of play in that space, and now it's drugs. You have pharmacy and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's only going to increase. I mean, they're world class in that space.
Okay, prediction. So we need to do predictions sometime in the future.
Sometime in the future. I predict that in the future we will do predictions. But we are coming up on the end of the show. So, hey, again, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What a great discussion. If you know of someone that might benefit from our channel from these kinds of discussions, please forward them a note. They can subscribe on our website, thisweekhealth.com, or you can go to wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, Overcast. That's what I use, Spotify, Stitcher. We're out there. You can find us. Go ahead and subscribe today, or send a note to someone and have them subscribe. We want to thank our channel sponsors who are investing in our mission to develop the next generation of health IT leaders. Those are VMware, Hillrom, and Starbridge Advisors. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.